Good morning and welcome. So excited to see everybody in the same room. We've seen all of your names come in the registration form, and it's really exciting for this to actually start. So, as Emery said, my name is Johanna Smith. I'm with the Climate Change Secretariat with the Government of Yukon. And I'm here as part of the Pan-Territorial Adaptation Partnership that put this together. Just to briefly introduce the rest of the team that brought you here, from the Yukon, Merran Smith and Steve Roddick, who will be speaking as well. From the NWT, Jim Sparling, Brian Sieben, who will be speaking, Carrie Van Gaffen and Bren Lineker. And from Nunavut, Colleen Healey, who will also be speaking, and Sarah Holzman. And we together represent and work for our territorial governments on climate change, and specifically climate change adaptation. So we are representatives of public governments, and that we, as public governments, are responsible for a very large amount of public infrastructure and public works within the three territories. Today, what we wanted to do was just give you a brief overview of why we're here and how we got here and what the whole point is, as well as a bit of an overview on some of the permafrost-specific projects that each of our governments are working on. So I'm very confident that all of us in the room know about the environmental implications of a changing climate and are probably experiencing them in our work or in our daily lives. But I just wanted to take a moment to put up a couple of slides about them, because that's where our story really starts. That's why we have come together as territorial governments to work together on this issue, and it's because of these implications that we're seeing within our communities and every day, and that the environmental changes that we're seeing and the implications that they have on our daily lives is the reason why we've come together and we want to really be working together on adapting to climate change. So another slide here about some of the impacts that we have from climate change, the direct impact on the lives of Yukoners and NWTers, I don't know how you pronounce that, but Northerners in general. And we experience these environmental change and impacts because of climate change in the face of some challenges, and these are challenges that we face across the three territories, and challenges I'm sure that all of us experience in our work as well. But as small governments and small teams within the North, we do have challenges with human capacity in terms of working within a small team, high staff turnover in some instances, and also trying to provide a high level of service delivery in a small and widely dispersed population. With that comes being a small government, but with a very large jurisdiction. We do have a wide scope of responsibility, and we do have challenges financial capacity challenges to try to deliver high service level of service to that population that's spread over a wide geographic region. And prioritization, we have challenges trying to undergo prioritization. We know that healthcare and housing and education are some of our key challenges, and that sometimes climate change is something that's bumped to the bottom of the list. But these challenges, what we've experienced when we've come together to try to work on climate change adaptation and recognize and address the environmental challenges that we're working through, we've recognized that our challenges are similar and shared across the territories, and it's a way for us to recognize some of our strengths as well, as to bring us together and to try to work through those challenges, and those challenges are really just everyday realities of working where we do and with what we do, and trying to work through that together. Okay, so with these the challenges that I've just outlined, and with the implications that we're experiencing from climate change, what are we actually doing about it? In 2009, the Northern Premiers agreed to work together to better understand the impacts of climate change throughout the North, to propose concrete and practical climate change adaptation measures, and develop an inventory of current and future renewable energy resources. So that premier level commitment in 2009 morphed into a climate change or a pan-territorial adaptation strategy that was released in 2011. And there are copies of the strategy out in the front. And the strategy was really a recognition that as territorial governments, we have a common interest in reducing the risk posed by climate change and to working together to address that risk. The strategy was also developed to address the similarities that we do experience across the three territories, but also recognizing that each territory does have some differences, and we do respond to those specific territorial territorial initiatives differently as well. It was also developed based on the realities of the North, that we do want to work together in collaboration and coordination to work through and for adaptation to climate change, but also recognizing that we do need to prioritize and that we can't do everything at once. And we identified 6 approaches to support the current and future climate change action. It was about sourcing funding. We recognized that we wanted to work together to source funding. We wanted to collaborate. We wanted to support communities of practice and physical communities as they adapt. We wanted to integrate adaptation into our everyday decision-making within our government structures. We wanted to share knowledge and understanding, very similar to this kind of work that we're doing today, and as well as develop and share tools, technology, and information across the North. So you might think, great, government put out another strategy. That's really useful. And I would suggest that today, these 3 days that we're together, this is what we envisioned. The strategy was really a document where we were able to put it down onto paper and to have some formal commitment about doing things like this. We really saw a vision of wanting to bring together decision makers and knowledge holders, recognizing that together we are able to share that knowledge and to build and to move forward in adaptation into the future. And it's very exciting that for this workshop to be taking place and for us all to be together, because this really is what we envisioned. We recognize as climate change officials that we are not territorial, we are not building engineers or transportation engineers. We don't do planning, like land use planning, but what we saw was a need to bring together, as I said, decision makers and knowledge holders, and this is in this kind of arena. Also, as a group, we have put together a set of one-page information notes, and these information notes are outside on the tables outside. They're also on your USB keys, but it was an opportunity for us to share information about adaptation projects that are currently taking place within our territory as well as across the 3 territories. And another example of how we've worked together is through the Homeowner Guide to Permafrost. These were plain language, accessible documents that are intended for homeowners that have buildings on permafrost. And it was another example of kind of sharing resources and contacts between a couple of jurisdictions to make that project a real reality. Now I'm going to ask my colleagues from Northwest Territories, or from Yukon, Steve and Merran, to just talk about a few of the Yukon specific. Thanks.
Thank you, Johanna. So I'm Merran and this is Steve, and we are both working on outreach and adaptation initiatives and projects with the Yukon government. So I wanted to turn the page a little bit more from a broad adaptation or broad territorial perspective to more a Yukon focus right now. So Steve and I are going to be speaking mostly about partnerships and communication initiatives. So within our small branch, we're doing a lot of work with different partners, so those can be with Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada, also with other federal government branches and across Yukon government, governmental departments, and also with other organizations within the Yukon, and also with some universities. So right now we are currently administering 9 climate change adaptation projects under Aboriginal Affairs. And 3 of these right now are related to permafrost. One is a hydrological response project, and this is being led through Water Resources. This project is looking at changes in temperature and precipitation, vegetation, and thawing permafrost, and how that can have impacts on timing, magnitude, and seasonality of flow. So this project is using a cold regions hydrological model from the University of Saskatchewan. And right now it's based on the Wolf Creek Basin, but they're hoping to extend this project throughout the rest of the Yukon. So hopefully we'll see some good information on permafrost thaw coming out of this. Another project, and I believe even our project manager for this project is here today. It's out of emergency measures, or sorry, not emergency measures, but energy, mines, and resources. And this is an agriculture and permafrost project. So this project is looking at what are the effects of changing permafrost conditions on agriculture within the Yukon, and also what are some of the best practices that have been developed to deal with this. And it's hoping to concentrate on 4 major areas of the Yukon. And then another project, which we're going to hear more about on the 3rd day of the workshop, is the Highways and Permafrost Project. And that's looking at the northwest section in the Yukon of the Alaska Highway. And so I won't say too much about it, but we'll hear more about that on Wednesday. But basically, it looks at the changing permafrost conditions and how they're impacting the highway. And that project is being done by Highways and Public Works and the Northern Climate Exchange. And another one of these projects under this funding is a Beringia Speaker Series. So at the Beringia Center, which is a museum interpretive center in Yukon, in Whitehorse, a lot of this information is going to be shared by the project managers about some of the results and what they've been doing. And this is going to be happening next fall from September to November. There was also one project that was done prior to this bunch of projects that was related to permafrost, and that was an infrastructure and vulnerabilities project. And this project basically assembled a lot of the different permafrost data in the territory, and it also addressed a gap, which was looking at the vulnerability state of a lot of the Yukon government-owned, leased, and managed buildings that existed, and then creating a database out of that. So that project has wrapped up, and there is a database on that. Another partnership that we're currently working on is, it's called YC3 for short, but it stands for the Yukon Climate Change Consortium, and that is a partnership with the Northern Climate Exchange, the Council of Yukon First Nation, and the Arctic Athabascan Council. And an example of a project we recently did was a health and climate change workshop that was held a few weeks ago, and that brought together a lot of community members from across the Yukon to discuss some of the health implications that they're experiencing with climate change. And so there was a few things related to permafrost that we definitely heard through that, like some of the effects on thawing permafrost and how the input into some of the water systems may be affecting some of the salmon in the Yukon River. And also we decided to overlap one day of that workshop with the Adaptation Practitioners Forum. So that was really neat because it brought a chance for people who are specializing in certain areas like agriculture or permafrost or water to meet with some of the community members and to hear what their priorities are and what they would like to look into. And so that hopefully in the future they'll be able to work together on some of these things. And also through that workshop, we had some presentations that sort of broadened our scope and gave us ideas of maybe ways to move forward. Like in Alaska, they have this Alaska Native Health Consortium, and this organization has put in this really neat local environmental observatory program throughout all their communities. And so they have people in the communities that are sort of the central point for people to provide information of what they're observing around their communities and out on the land, and then that information can get back to a central organization in Alaska, and then they can take that information and share it maybe with some universities or people that they think might be able to figure out what's going on, and then that information can go back to the communities, and maybe they can get more of a sense of what's really happening out there. So these are just some of the partnerships that we currently have underway, but there are a lot more, and we're finding it really effective for moving forward on some of these issues that we're all facing. So now I'm going to share the podium with Steve, and he's going to talk a little bit about what the communication initiatives are around some of these projects.
Thanks, Merran. Before I get the hook here, I'm going to try to move quickly through 3 specific initiatives, online communications initiatives that the government of Yukon has invested in to try to improve information sharing and connectivity between people who work with permafrost. So the first is the Yukon Permafrost Network, which I think I'm probably just going to skip over because Sarah Laxton will be giving a presentation on it later today. So you'll hear a lot more about it then. The second initiative is called yukonwater.ca, and this is a website that serves as a center for information about Yukon water resources and how they are managed and monitored in the territory. Among other features of this site, it allows users to access an interactive water data catalog and provides a comprehensive list of agencies that are involved in management and monitoring of water resources in the territory. This database is a useful tool for permafrost researchers because it can allow users to see how and to what extent bodies of water are being affected by permafrost thaw. As Steve Coquel noted this morning in his presentation, permafrost melt can have a profound impact on water quality, and as we'll see in the next presentation as well, the interaction between permafrost thawing and water has been significant in areas of the Yukon, specifically in the northern areas around Old Crow Flats. So the last initiative that I want to touch briefly on here is the Arctic Climate Change Adaptation Portal, which is a new project being developed by Canada and the US through the Arctic Council. So while it's still in its early stages, this portal aims to provide a central space for communities, decision makers, and people who work with climate change across the circumpolar north to share their experiences in dealing with these changes. Through greater local, regional, and international communication on the challenges and the solutions being pursued throughout the Arctic, it is hoped that we can use this portal to learn from each other and begin to develop shared understandings and best practices in adapting to our changing climate. As permafrost-related impacts are a problem faced by people throughout the circumpolar north, this issue will undoubtedly feature as a central component of the portal. So to conclude, these are some of the initiatives that the government of Yukon is engaged in to address the impacts of climate change and permafrost thaw. And now I'd like to hand things over to Brian Sieben to talk a bit more about what the government of NWT is doing here in this territory.
Thanks, Steve and Merran. It's my pleasure to tell you that climate change and permafrost thaw are not abstract to the Northwest Territories government. Our departments must deal with permafrost thaw in day-to-day operations, and this is virtually most of our departments, including our municipal affairs and community affairs department, our housing corporation, our transportation department, public works, my department, environment, natural resources, and education, culture, and employment. I was going to mention some of the highlights of activities by department, and our Public Works and Government Services Department maintains building infrastructure for the Northwest Territories government. And as such, we've developed many best practices, and on the left you can see a guide for maintaining thermosiphons in permafrost. On the right you can see a guide for geotechnical site investigations in permafrost. The department has also developed a good building practices handbook, and copies of most of these publications, again, are on the sticks that you all got when you registered. The department is also very active in the Northern Infrastructure Standards Initiative that you're going to learn about after lunch, and some of our other departments are also contributing to that initiative. I'm also very excited that we have a new initiative where my department's working with Public Works to develop tools for assessing building foundations, and you're going to hear a presentation from the contractor, Associate Engineering, on this tomorrow. Our transportation department is responsible for maintaining highways and transportation infrastructure, including airports and ferries in the Northwest Territories, and they have many on-the-ground initiatives, and this is again part of their day-to-day operations. As you can see from this picture of an abandoned piece of the Ingham Trail just east of Yellowknife, showing what happens with lack of maintenance with permafrost thaw causing heaving in the road. Currently, the department has $1.85 million for research out of the Building Canada Fund. They are developing a departmental adaptation plan part of that adaptation plan is assessing the risk to transportation infrastructure. So my colleagues in the Transportation Department are being very proactive in assessing risk assessments for highways, airports, and ferry crossings. And you're tomorrow going to hear a presentation by Lucas Arnson from BGC Consulting on a risk assessment that was done for Highway 3. The department is very active in the Transport Canada network of expertise in permafrost, and the Northwest Territories government has recently announced a massive $600 million for infrastructure for the next transportation infrastructure for the next 10 years. Of that, $3 million will be allocated for research. I'm really excited. One of the really proactive things that my government's done in the last year is our Geoscience Office in our Industry, Tourism and Investment Department has created a permafrost scientist position, and you had the pleasure of listening to Steve Kickel this morning. Steve is very active in many things, especially on permafrost slumping, which he outlined in his presentation. He's also, as he outlined, mapping permafrost throughout vast areas of the landscape. Having Steve on staff has created a resource for all departments to draw on. So this is a really useful, really enables climate change adaptation by all of our departments. That's someone we can call in-house. Then my department, I work for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in the Climate Change Unit. And our role is to coordinate adaptation within the government. And we also undertake projects that for the good of all departments. Some of them that we undertake are downscaling, producing climate change scenarios for communities. We're currently developing a framework that's going to coordinate adaptation across government and outline ways that we can provide information to decision makers at all levels on how to adapt to climate change. We also work with researchers and partnerships. We have a website, nwtclimatechange.ca, that's on that cool hat that I hope you all picked up outside. And we also coordinate a partnership with Aboriginal Affairs in Northern Development Canada, which really deserves some thank you. The Aboriginal Affairs in Northern Development Canada has established a partnership with the Northwest Territories government to enable our frontline departments to adapt to climate change. And some of the projects I'm going to tell you about here have been funded through that project. And without that funding, it would be really difficult to bring that about. So we would like to thank Aboriginal Affairs in Northern Development Canada for that funding. One of the projects is a terrain mapping and slump prediction project. And this is being done by Education and Culture and Employment, the Prince of Wales Northern Heritage Centre. And they're working with Steve Kickel, again, our in-house permafrost expert. And their interest isn't infrastructure, although infrastructure, I guess we're interested in, could be applied to infrastructure. Their interest is cultural sites, that we have many archaeological sites for the Northwest Territories. You saw the massive slumping that Steve Kickel showed you this morning. And many of those important cultural sites could be threatened. So they are developing tools to predict which sites could be vulnerable. My department is working with communities to conduct a municipal hazardous waste assessment. And many of the hazardous waste sites are on sites that are subject to permafrost slumping and other climate change risks, such as coastal erosion. So we are identifying which sites are most vulnerable to climate change natural hazards. And there will be a poster on this project by my colleague Gerald Enns at the poster session this evening. The Municipal and Community Affairs Department has been really progressive in undertaking a territorial hazard assessment. You say, what is that? So traditionally, when you look at emergency planning, provincial or territorial level, you sort of think all the nasty things that can happen. But to my knowledge, that's never been done with a climate change lens. So with ANSI funding, we are conducting a hazard assessment looking at things such as thawing permafrost, coastal erosion, forest fires, flooding due to ice jams, on emergency planning. So this will be a resource that's available to communities. Additionally, my colleagues in the ENR Center for Geomatics are undertaking permafrost mapping, and some of this is being done in conjunction with Natural Resources Canada and the Canadian Space Agency. But other projects we're really excited are going on with funding from ANSI, where we're currently mapping Fort Simpson, Norman Wells, and Tuktoyaktuk. And next year we'll be involved in Nunavut. My colleague Steve Schwartz will present a poster this evening on enhanced coastal erosion due to permafrost. I encourage you to take a look at that. Due to permafrost, coastal erosion on our Arctic coast is increasing rapidly, up to 10 meters a year. So take a look at Steve's poster. Now I'll hand this over to my colleague, Colleen Healey from Nunavut government. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'm Colleen Healey. I'm the Climate Change Program Manager for the Government of Nunavut. And I'm just going to fill you in a little on what we're doing over in Nunavut. Currently, the Government of Nunavut is working on, we're in the final stages, in fact, of developing the Nunavut Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan, which we're pretty excited about. And this is scheduled to be released in and around the spring of 2014, so keep an eye out for it. This document will include commitments from all Government of Nunavut departments and relevant agencies, and will have a pan-Nunavut perspective. The plan will help to ensure that climate change continues to be integrated into government decision-making, as well as mainstreamed across the territory. One of the projects I'd also like to mention, and it'll sound a little similar to some of the other activities going on across the territories, in Nunavut we're also doing quite a bit on the terrain monitoring side, and you'll hear more about that throughout the next few days. Currently, one of our major projects in Nunavut is a 4-year terrain analysis study that is being carried out in 8 communities in Nunavut, and this is using INSAR technology, which we will learn a little bit more about, I think, later today during the tools session. This project is being managed by Bob Chappell, who I think is hiding somewhere there in the back, from our Department of Community and Government Services, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to fill you in on all the activities they're doing there. With this project, 8 communities were selected, and they were selected based on their need for this information, as well as criteria that was identified from previous climate change adaptation projects that were carried out in Nunavut over the past few years. These maps will be integrated into community plans and will help municipalities make more informed decisions on future developments in the communities. Climate change and mining in Nunavut, it's becoming a bigger issue and something that we need to be looking more into. So in the last couple of years, we carried out a project that assessed the vulnerability of Nunavut's mining industry to climate change, and this included impacts from permafrost. Climate change effects to the mining industry are not well enough understood in Nunavut, and so this project sought to identify potential issues and adaptation measures that could be considered, applied, and incorporated into decision-making around resource development. This project was split into 2 components: the risk assessment on the mining industry in Nunavut from climate change, and the second was identifying best practices for northern mining, with a particular focus on waste management facilities and coastal infrastructure. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to this slide. This is a screenshot from our Nunavut Climate Change Center, or NC3 as we call it. And it's our online resource center for climate change information in Nunavut. This site is accessible to both community members in Nunavut and to the general research population, and is translated into all 4 languages. This website includes everything from basic information on climate change, non-technical project summaries of adaptation work, inventories of Inuit Hayimayatuhangit, or traditional knowledge on climate change, and resources for communities. We work with many partners to ensure that new information is captured on the site, and some of you are here in the audience today, and we thank you very much for your contributions. For more information on any other projects that are currently being carried out on climate change in Nunavut, I strongly encourage you to take a look at the website. The URL is climatechangenunavut.ca, and we've got some pamphlets and postcards available in the lobby. Now another website. This is the Pan-Territorial Adaptation Partnership website, and we just went live on Monday. We're going to be revamping the site over the next few months, but we wanted to have a venue that was available to all of you to get copies of the materials that you're going to hear about today at the workshop, the presentations and abstracts. And it's a website that you can go throughout the year to find out what's going on with the 3 territories on the climate change adaptation front, and what are we up to. So the URL for the Pan-Territorial Adaptation Partnership is www.northernadaptation.ca, and you'll see that over the next few days posted all over the place, I'm sure. So to wrap up, actually I'll leave it up there for you. From Pan-Territorial perspective, the Pan-Territorial Adaptation Partnership will continue to address critical adaptation issues across the North. We can't do this alone, nor all at once. However, by working closely with researchers, community leaders, decision makers, and knowledge holders like yourselves, we can continue to identify key projects that address our collective needs and goals. The 3 territorial governments have a common interest in reducing the risks posed by climate change. We've developed a model here that allows us to work quite effectively together. Through this collaboration, we are seeing that others are beginning to approach northern climate change concerns, not as actions that need to be done to us or for us, but rather with us. Just as Pan-Territorial Adaptation Partnership works collaboratively across the territories, we encourage each and every one of you to work collaboratively with us to improve our community's resilience to climate change. Thank you all very much for being here today, and we look forward to your input throughout the week.
Thank you very much, Colleen, as well as the other territorial representatives. A couple of notes struck me during this last series of presentations, and that is just the number of initiatives that the territorial governments are taking with respect to climate change adaptation. The other note that struck me was the collaboration between the governments, and I believe that, personally, I believe that that's a very significant advancement. So we have about 5 minutes for questions. If anybody has a question for any one of the territorial representatives, I'd invite you to step up to the microphone. Any questions from the webcasters? Oh, go ahead.
The experience we've got on the table there, around the table, on a scale of really bad to not so bad, where do you place permafrost as a climate adaptation issue? And perhaps you could also comment on where it falls in your list of priorities for other climate adaptation issues.
Looking around the table, who's going to take that question? Well, I think, Tony, in terms of where it rates, the first workshop that we're holding is on permafrost. So it's definitely, it was indicated in the Pan-Territorial Adaptation Strategy and with all 3 of our governments that permafrost is one of the key issues that we share across the North in terms of as a concern to be dealing with, as well as where solutions and adaptations are being creative. So it definitely popped to the top in terms of where we wanted to start our work in terms of connecting folks together. And in terms of where it rates from being really bad to not so bad, my view on all things, and this is, in my personal view, as well as probably my professional view as well, is that climate change is happening, and we are a resilient population, and we need to address the things that are happening out there. So it is not about whether it's really bad or not so bad. It's about something that's happening, and we need to address it.
Any other comments from the territorial panel? If not, we have another question.
Hi, Billy Archie, Hamlet of Buklavic. Just a question to three territories, and it's an issue, community capacity. When we look at all these initiatives, and you don't have one particular agency in the community that has that ability to fill out applications and go through the hoops of this process of trying to access some of these dollars to help mitigate, because we have a couple of roads in Aklavik that are really soft, and we know it's climate change, but again, which department and who's responsible? And you know, it is so many programs out there, and I think we need to try and identify the whole issue of how are you going to build capacities in the communities.
Thanks, Bill, for the question. I think we all agree capacity is an issue in all of our communities, and there isn't one easy solution. I guess one of the things we're doing is we're producing those plain language information notes, because we know that senior administrative officers in communities are overwhelmed. We're trying to make it very simple for them to have the information they need at their handy, so they can make decisions. The other thing I think you can do, though, is if you want information on what funding exists, if you're interested in our project, is you can contact our office, and we try to keep track of all the different funding programs that are available to communities. So you can contact us, and we will try to line you up with funding that may be available, and try to help you knowing when deadlines for applications and such are. So if you go to our website, nwtclimatechange.ca, there's contact information there, and you can contact us, and we'd be happy to work with your community to get the information that you need. Thanks.
And just to follow up, I would speak. I'll speak for Colleen as well, but that I think that all three of our territorial, the climate change offices work in the same kind of vein, where we do want to be that door into the territorial government with regards to climate change, and for people who want to be doing work as well as who are interested in funding or projects, ideas, or any of that kind of stuff. We do want to be that door in, and would welcome people coming through the door.
I might also add and speak for Johanna as well, if that's okay. And to reiterate again some of the things that we already mentioned, but by working together, I mean, up until recently I was an office of one, and now I'm an office of two, and it's kind of similar in the other territories. I think we're all very familiar with the capacity challenges we have in the north. But this partnership alone, just working across the three territories, we're now a partnership of 6+, which is incredible. I mean, putting on a workshop like this alone is not something that we would have been able to do as singular territories. So what we're trying to do is increase our capacity by working together, by working with you guys, and also to communicate and improve our communications, because we're a lot of isolated communities. I mean, Nunavut alone, all of our communities are fly-in, and for the most part, and that's really difficult, trying to communicate one-on-one on the ground when you can't even really afford to get into all of them. So doing things like having a web presence, trying to share our information in alternative formats to get the word out and get communities responding. We're very open to other people's insights and input, and we encourage you to to have those discussions with us. So thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.